Hello, and thanks for watching another edition of ARFCOM News. Today I want to tell you about the federal court ruling which says the government can't charge you to exercise constitutional rights, authoritarian baloney from Maloney, and how stranger danger is the gun salesman of the century, plus lots more. But before we get started, I want to tell you about the cruelty-free, gluten-free, non-GMO, zero trans fat night vision products offered to you by our friends at tnvc.com, just like Mom used to make. If you like seeing stuff more than not seeing stuff, take a look at our sponsor tnvc.com, your source for quality night vision gear to make you the bump in the night. I'd like to get started by talking to you folks about common sense religion control. Now hold on, no one is going to take away your granddad's Presbyterianism. We just want to make sure the wrong people don't get indoctrinated into dangerous assault religions. I mean, if you want to worship God, that's your business. I just think you should have to take a class and pay a fee for a permit first. We also need to start a dialogue about easy to access weapons of mass information. Did you know that anyone, even a child, can walk into a store and buy a computer without so much as a background check? We can't allow just anyone to post content to the internet. Do you want to live in a world where you can't trust something is true just because someone posted it on the internet? I sure don't. That's why we should require a background check before the purchase of any computing device, and to ensure background checks are being performed for second-hand sales, every computing device will need to be registered in a national database. That way, if you wish to transfer a computing device, you simply go to a licensed computer dealer who will perform the check while you wait. Not only will this ensure dangerous thoughts can't spread, it will also make it possible to confiscate computing devices when they're used inappropriately. Of course, end users will need to pay a nominal fee to cover the cost of this registration system. Say $200? That should cover it. And obviously, anyone who works for the government would be exempt from the registration and the fee because they can automatically be trusted no matter what. Yeah, it sounds pretty stupid when we apply this sort of thinking to other fundamental rights, doesn't it? Courts have ruled you can't charge a poll tax in order to vote, and recently, Judge Colleen Kolar-Cotelli of the U.S. District Court for the Capital Wasteland ruled the National Park Service cannot charge a fee or require a permit to film in national parks. Courts have ruled many times over the years the government may not convert a right into a privilege by charging a fee or requiring a permit to exercise fundamental constitutionally guaranteed rights. Yet, that is exactly what states and county governments do when they require a permit to own or carry a gun, and that's what the federal government has been doing since 1934 by requiring an exorbitant sum of money to register militarily credible arms and important safety equipment. The $200 tax imposed in 1934 would be equivalent to almost $4,000 in today's devalued American pesos. I believe it is long past time for the entire NFA to face strict scrutiny in court, and the recent aggressiveness of the ATF may just force this to come to pass. I hate to say I told you so, but who am I kidding? I love to say that. I cautioned you not to get tunnel vision on H.R. 127 because I didn't believe it would go anywhere, and I told you we would be seeing a deluge of authoritarian control freak bills. The deluge isn't here yet, but we are seeing the first few trickles come through, hinting at what is in store. Mark my words, some of these bills will sound much more reasonable in comparison to the bat guano crazy we saw from Sheila Jackson Lee. The bills proposed by Boss Karen and House Oversight and Reform Committee Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney would make it a felony instead of a misdemeanor to buy a gun for a prohibited possessor, would require background checks for all transfers at gun shows, and would allow the ATF and FBI to retain records from background checks for 90 days. It would also mandate gun owners carry liability insurance, and would require all new handguns employ so-called smart gun technology. Now I want you to note a few things here. First, each of these is a separate bill. This is a really smart move, and it's reminiscent of the strategy employed in Virginia. The idea is throw everything out there, and if anything gets any traction at all, they can really get behind that one and push hard. The second thing to take note of is how much more reasonable all of this sounds in comparison to H.R. 127. Yes, each of these bills are absolutely awful. Yes, I know you fine folks are aware of how pointless it is to increase penalties for straw sales when the ATF is more interested in selling guns to Mexican coke dealers and putting licensed gun stores out of business over minor typos than they are in prosecuting straw sales or investigating the Aryan Brotherhood and MS-13 for gun trafficking. That would involve real police work after all. You want to see a real difference? Stop treating FFL holders as though they are all criminals who are just sliding by on a technicality, and start treating them like partners. Most dealers would be happy to have the opportunity to report straw sales to the ATF if they knew F-Troop would actually bother to do anything about it. You have a crime taking place on video where the perpetrator presented a government-issued ID card and filled out a form with their signature. From an evidentiary standpoint, that's a slam dunk. If a dealer suspects someone has lied on the 4473 or is attempting a straw sale, they can stall the person there in the store while local LE responds, or they can tell the person they are delayed and have ATF waiting for them when they come to pick up the gun later. But the ATF shows absolutely zero inclination to prosecuting this type of crime. If they did, it would provide a strong deterrent, and it would stop one of the main sources for criminals to obtain guns. Requiring background checks at gun shows sounds reasonable to folks who aren't into guns, but here's what I think would be a lot more effective. Create a web portal for anyone to use the NICS system for any reason, and make it a felony to transfer to a prohibited possessor whether or not you know they are. It is currently only illegal to knowingly do so, and even under Baloney's new bill, it's still only illegal if you know someone is a prohibited possessor. If anyone can run a background check on anyone else, then the checks can't be used as a de facto registry. And by making it a felony to transfer to a prohibited possessor, we can create sufficient motivation without making anything mandatory. I've always felt you are likely to get better compliance with the right incentives than you would with mandates. Maybe it doesn't sound so bad to allow the FBI to retain background check records, but the longer they're allowed to retain records, the more opportunity there is for those records to be shared with other agencies and for the privacy of gun owners to be violated. Requiring insurance is another thing which might sound reasonable and is likely to be compared to automobile insurance, but mandatory government policies of any type are at odds with personal liberty, and doubly so when they impose on fundamental human rights like the right to be armed. Should you be held criminally or civilly liable if you use a gun in an illegal or negligent manner? You bet. Should you carry insurance? Maybe. But the government doesn't have the authority to compel you to do so. Smart guns also might sound like a smart idea, but they're probably the worst part of this whole thing. Now, don't get me wrong. If someone made a gun that would absolutely, for certain, always, without the slightest doubt, delay, or hesitation, fire for the authorized user and also do a decent job of preventing unauthorized use, I'd probably buy one. But how many times per day do you try to unlock your phone and it doesn't read your fingerprint right away? And that's without sweat or blood on your finger. Is it possible that gun companies someday could develop software which analyzes a variety of factors, such as finger and palm prints, along with finger placement, grip pressure, gait, voice, electrical impulses, and who knows what else, to maintain a real-time, multi-factor assessment of whether the gun is in the possession of an authorized user? I don't know, maybe. That would be pretty cool. But consider that guns are tools which are only really needed in the worst case situations. When you need that gun, you might be missing a finger, or you might have to shoot from your weak hand in a non-standard position while desperately fighting for your life in driving rain. And what happens to all the obsolete handguns people want to collect, such as 1911s? Kind of ruins the whole point if I have to glom on some electronic abominations to the gun that won 2 world wars. And finally, if this is so important and if the technology is ready, then why isn't there a single law enforcement agency in the country which even allows the use of so-called smart guns, let alone requires them? If you can get the LEOs on board, I'll consider it. But until then, don't force me into being your beta tester. It's a great idea whose time hasn't come yet. Now hold on to your butts because we're going to see an awful lot of bad bills like this in the next few years. The Hill reports they don't believe these bills will get the 60 votes needed to pass the Senate, even if they somehow made it out of the House, and I tend to agree. Still, it's not a bad idea to call 202-224-3121 and tell your representatives to stop these terrible bills. Just don't get all wrapped around the axle about this one, or H.R. 127, or any one of the flood of bills we are going to see. Stay frosty, guys. We're going to need you to really lean in and do your part time and time again over the next few years. If you don't have the stamina for that, then at least give us a good push when we get to the bills which are more likely to pass. You feel me? Don't lose hope, though. We have hard work ahead of us, to be sure, but we also have a lot of new people who can help. I've been reporting for the last year about how every single month has smashed gun sale records for the previous years, and we're still crushing it. There were more than 4.3 million NICS background checks performed for gun sales last month. As always, there are a couple of addendums and quid pro quos. This number isn't a perfect representation of the total number because some states allow the use of concealed carry permit or gun license in lieu of an instant check. Many of these checks represent more than one gun transferred, and private sales are not reflected in the number. But it does give us a general feel for the relative number of guns purchased. Over the last year, we've seen about 40% of gun sales have been to first-time buyers. So that means roughly 1.75 new gun owners just bought their first gun last month alone. I can't get over how staggeringly enormous this is. There's no reason not to believe it will change the face of gun politics for at least a generation. Not only is this almost double the number of checks from January of last year, it is head and shoulders above every other month last year, including December, which is traditionally the month with the highest number of gun sales. So put your hands together for Uncle Naughty Hands as gun salesman of the century. Not only did Creepy Joe help pull gun sales out of the Trump slump, he absolutely demolished his former boss's record of only 2.5 million checks in January of 2013. Way to go, Joe. That's going to be a hard record to top. Hoplophobes are always whining about how they believe firearm training should be mandatory. And for once, I agree with them. Age-appropriate firearm safety training should be required in K through 12 at least once per year. For young children, that mostly just means they need to know what to do if they encounter a firearm. The rules for young kids are stop, don't touch, leave the area, and tell an adult. It's that simple, but teaching these rules can save lives, and every single kid deserves to hear them at least once a year in school. To that end, Tennessee Senator Joey Hensley and Representative Brandon Ogles have sponsored SB 227 and HB 103 respectively. If passed, they would require schools to provide at least 15 minutes of age-appropriate, politically neutral gun safety instruction each year. If you live in the volunteer state, please pause the video right now and call 615-741-1100 and ask to speak with your politicrators. For that matter, even if you don't live in Tennessee, don't let that be the reason you don't pitch in and help get these bills past their respective houses. Tell those public servants there is simply no reason to oppose this legislation. Tell them it will save lives and nothing could be more important. Well, friends, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoy watching these things because I sure like making them for you. If you want to help us keep bringing you banger content like this, please support the folks who support us. Not only does TNVC.com give you night vision with that cool, refreshing, never bitter taste that goes down smooth, they also have mounts, lights, and all sorts of other gear to make you the bump in the night. And if you'd like to help support us more directly, you can buy fly shirts like this one in our Teespring store. Or if you'd like to try your luck and see if you can win your choice of rad shirt from our Teespring store, post a comment containing the phrase "sweep the leg" in the YouTube comments, and I will arbitrarily and unilaterally choose the best one. I love you.